5 years of marriage. When I say those words, it feels like I'm talking about someone else's life, not my own. My wife, Dana, and I had what most people would call a modern arrangement. She worked a high-paying job at a marketing firm while I stayed home. Not exactly the American dream, huh? But it wasn't laziness. I was searching, trying to figure out who I was and what I was meant to do. My previous job, a soul-crushing grind in tech support, left me burned out and disillusioned. It paid the bills, sure, but it drained every ounce of creativity and hope out of me. Dana, on the other hand, was on fire. Her career was skyrocketing, and her confidence was magnetic. I admired her, but deep down, I felt like I was living in her shadow. She was supportive, or at least she seemed to be. She always said she believed in me, but whenever I'd float an idea for a business, she'd shoot it down. "That's too risky," or "you're not ready," she'd say, often with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. It stung, but I told myself she was just being practical. We were living off her income, and she was careful with her money. I respected that, even when it hurt to hear her say, "I don't think we should dip into savings for your ideas right now." Still, I loved her. She was my wife, my partner, the woman I'd promised to cherish forever. I convinced myself that the tension between us was just a phase, that once I got my business off the ground, things would even out. But in hindsight, there were cracks in our perfect little life. Subtle things. The way she seemed distracted during our conversations. The late nights at the office that became more frequent. I ignored them because I didn't want to be the insecure, needy husband. I trusted her. Or maybe I just wanted to. I didn't realize how fragile our foundation had become until the day everything shattered. The day I found out that the woman I thought was my rock had been hiding a secret that would rip my life apart. It was a Thursday afternoon, one of those rare days where I felt a surge of clarity. I've been brainstorming ideas for a business, a small digital marketing consultancy, maybe, and I felt like I was finally onto something. I was scrolling through my laptop, lost in thought, when Dana's phone buzzed on the counter next to me. She was in the shower, singing one of those upbeat pop songs she loved. I wouldn't have paid the phone any mind if it weren't for the name flashing on the screen. Mark Davidson. Mark was a name I recognized all too well. He was one of her work partners, someone she spoke about frequently with admiration. "Mark's a genius at what he does," she'd said once, her voice tinged with awe. "He's helped me so much in my career." It didn't sit well with me back then, but I let it slide. Why wouldn't I? She never gave me a reason to doubt her loyalty. But as I stared at her phone that day, something about the timing of his message felt off. The text read, "Had a great time last night. Can't wait for round 2. Winking face. I froze. My chest tightened, and my heart pounded so hard it felt like it might crack a rib. I told myself it was nothing, a joke, a misunderstanding. But the words on the screen were seared into my brain. Can't wait for round 2. Round 2 of what? I didn't touch the phone. That would make me the bad guy, right? I'd be invading her privacy. Instead, I stood there, staring at the screen until the notification disappeared. When she came out of the shower, her hair wrapped in a towel, she looked radiant. She kissed me on the cheek, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. "What are you up to?" she asked casually. I shrugged, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Just brainstorming business ideas." "Good," she said with a smile. "I'm glad you're finally moving forward." She sounded so genuine, so loving. For a moment, I thought maybe I was overreacting. Maybe Mark's text didn't mean anything. But as she went about her day, her phone now tucked into her pocket, I couldn't shake the unease gnawing at me. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I replayed the last few months in my head. The late nights at work, the sudden bursts of energy she had when she came home, the new outfits she'd started wearing. "It's for the office," she'd explain when I commented on them. But now, every detail felt like a puzzle piece I hadn't seen clearly before. Still, I didn't have proof, and without it, confronting her would only make me look paranoid. I decided to wait and watch, hoping, praying, that I was wrong. Waiting was agony. Every day, the doubts grew louder in my mind. I'd catch myself staring at Dana when she wasn't looking, searching for any sign, any clue that could either confirm or disprove the horrible suspicion taking root in my head. I felt like I was going crazy. A week later, I broke. I couldn't take the uncertainty anymore. I needed answers. That night, after Dana had gone to bed, I quietly took her phone from the nightstand and slipped into the living room. My hands shook as I unlocked it. I knew her passcode, of course. Trust is funny that way, isn't it? I opened her messages first. There was a thread with Mark Davidson. My heart sank as I scrolled through the texts. Last night was amazing. You always know how to make me feel alive. Her reply, you bring out the best in me. Can't wait for our next meeting. Maybe Friday, after the client presentation. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. It wasn't just one message. There were dozens. Some of them were flirtatious, others outright intimate. Each one was a knife to my chest. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. But it got worse. Buried in the messages were photos, selfies of Dana in outfits I didn't recognize. Dresses that hugged her body, makeup more dramatic than her usual style. One image showed her in the dress she'd worn to her last late meeting. My stomach churned. I'd kissed her goodbye that night, told her how beautiful she looked, and she'd gone to him. I stumbled back against the couch, overwhelmed. Part of me wanted to scream, to storm into the bedroom and demand an explanation. But then I saw it, the confirmation I didn't want but couldn't ignore. There was a picture of her and Mark, taken in what looked like a hotel room. They were smiling, their faces close. His hand rested on her thigh, and her head leaned against his shoulder. It wasn't an innocent photo. It was the kind of picture couples take when they're too deep in each other's lives to hide it anymore. My mind went blank. I stared at the screen, trying to process what I was seeing. This wasn't just a fling. It wasn't a one-time mistake. This was an affair, a full-blown betrayal that had been happening right under my nose. I didn't know how long I sat there, but eventually I forced myself to act. I forwarded the photos and messages to my email as evidence. I didn't know what I was going to do with them yet, but I knew I needed them. Then I put her phone back on the nightstand, careful not to wake her. As I lay in bed next to her, my chest heavy with anger and heartbreak, I realized I couldn't face this alone. I needed someone I could trust, someone who would know what to do. The next morning, I called my brother. My brother, Matt, has always been the steady one. He's a high-powered lawyer, the kind of guy who stays calm under pressure. Growing up, he was the one who handled our family's crises with a level head, while I was the emotional one. If anyone could help me make sense of this mess, it was him. I called him early in the morning, while Dana was still getting ready for work. My voice was shaky, and I could barely get the words out. Matt, I need to talk to you. It's done. She's been cheating on me. There was silence on the other end, followed by a quiet. Are you sure? I have proof, I whispered, glancing toward the bedroom to make sure Dana couldn't hear me. Texts, photos. I saw everything, Matt. Stay calm, he said, his voice steady and reassuring. Come to my office. We'll figure this out. I hung up and tried to act normal as Dana kissed me goodbye on her way out. She looked so put together, so composed, as if nothing in her world was wrong. I felt like a fraud, forcing a smile and pretending I didn't know what I knew. As soon as she left, I grabbed the evidence I'd forwarded to my email and drove to Matt's office. When I got there, he took one look at me and knew I was barely holding it together. Let's sit down, he said, leading me into his private office. Tell me everything. I spilled it all, the texts, the late nights, the photos. I even admitted to sneaking through her phone. I know I shouldn't have done that, but I had to know the truth. Matt nodded, his expression grim. You did what you had to do. And now we need to be smart about this. Do you want to confront her? I don't know, I admitted. I don't even know what I want right now. He leaned back in his chair, considering. If you're thinking about divorce, you need to gather more evidence. The photos and texts are a good start, but if this goes to court, you'll need to prove the affair beyond a shadow of a doubt. How do I do that? I asked, my voice trembling. Matt's answer was methodical, practical. He explained how I could document her movements, how I could track her without tipping her off. It sounds cold, but you need to protect yourself. If this goes south, she could come after you financially. You need to be prepared. It felt surreal, sitting there and talking about my marriage like it was a business transaction. But Matt was right. I couldn't let my emotions cloud my judgment. If Dana was capable of betraying me like this, I had to assume she wouldn't hesitate to use our situation to her advantage. By the time I left his office, I had a plan. Matt would help me hire a private investigator, someone discreet who could gather the evidence we needed. I'd keep my emotions in check and wait for the right moment to confront her. But as I drove home, the weight of what was happening began to sink in. This wasn't just about catching her or protecting myself. This was about my life, my marriage, my future. And no matter what came next, I knew one thing for sure. Nothing would ever be the same again. The next few days were a haze of forced normalcy. Dana acted as though everything was fine, smiling at me over dinner, asking about my day, even cuddling up to me on the couch. It was like she was living in a parallel world where her betrayal didn't exist. Or maybe she just thought I'd never find out. I played along, keeping my emotions buried deep. Every time she touched me, it felt like my skin was on fire. Every kiss was a reminder of her lies. But I couldn't let her see my anger or my pain. Not yet. Matt wasted no time hiring a private investigator. The guy's name was Jack, and he was as no-nonsense as they come. When we met, he laid it out in plain terms. If she's cheating, we'll catch her. But you need to be patient. These things take time. He set up surveillance on Dana's car, placed discreet trackers on her favorite bags, and even monitored her phone records. It felt invasive, like I was betraying her in some twisted way, but I reminded myself that she'd already crossed that line. I was just trying to protect myself from the fallout. Meanwhile, I did my part. I installed a small camera in the living room and another in the bedroom smoke detector. I told myself it was insurance in case she brought Mark to our home. The thought made me sick, but I couldn't ignore the possibility. The first week passed without much activity. Dana worked late a couple of nights, but Jack didn't find anything suspicious. I started to doubt myself, wondering if I'd misread the texts, the photos. Maybe it wasn't what it seemed. Maybe she was just close with Mark in a professional way. But then the second week rolled around, and the truth I'd been dreading finally came to light. One evening, Jack called me. "We've got something," he said. His voice was calm, professional, but I could sense the gravity of what he was about to say. "Your wife checked into the Westmore Hotel downtown this afternoon. She's there with Mark Davidson." The words hit me like a truck. My knees buckled, and I had to sit down. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "There's no mistake," Jack said. "We've got photos of them entering the hotel together. They checked in under fake names, but we've verified it's them. Do you want us to continue surveillance?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Keep tracking them. I want to know everything." After I hung up, I sat in the dark for hours, staring at nothing. The confirmation I'd been waiting for, the proof I thought I needed, it didn't feel like vindication. It felt like my entire world was collapsing in slow motion. When Dana came home later that night, she kissed me like nothing had happened. She smelled of expensive perfume, the kind she only wore on special occasions. I wondered if it was the same scent Mark had been breathing in just hours earlier. I wanted to scream at her, demand answers, make her explain how she could do this to me. But instead, I just nodded, asked how her day was, and pretended everything was fine. Inside, though, I was burning. The following days were excruciating. I kept up the charade, smiling when Dana smiled, laughing when she cracked jokes. But inside, I was unraveling. Every time she kissed me goodbye or looked at me with those familiar eyes, I saw nothing but lies. Jack kept me updated. Over the next week, he followed Dana and Mark through their routine. Late lunches, hotel meetups, stolen moments in his car. He documented everything with meticulous detail, photos, timestamps, even audio recordings when possible. The more I saw, the angrier I became. They were so casual, so shameless, as if their affair was just another part of their day. The worst part wasn't even the physical betrayal. It was the way she looked at him in the photos, the way she smiled. It was a look she hadn't given me in years. I couldn't shake the thought that maybe I'd lost her long before I even realized it. One night, Jack handed me a file with everything he'd gathered. "This is more than enough for a divorce," he said. "Whenever you're ready to confront her, you've got what you need." I nodded, my hands trembling as I flipped through the evidence. Each photo, Each report was another nail in the coffin of our marriage. But I wasn't ready to confront her yet. Not until I could do it on my terms. That night, I stayed up late, staring at the file. The anger and heartbreak churned inside me. But amidst the chaos, a plan began to take shape. I wasn't going to let her walk away from this unscathed. She had taken advantage of my trust, my love, and she wasn't going to get away with it. I called Matt the next morning and laid out my plan. I want to file for divorce, I told him, my voice steadier than I expected. But I wanted to be clean, no room for her to twist things or make excuses. Understood, he said. We'll use the evidence to negotiate. This is your chance to protect yourself financially. If she tries to contest it, we'll bury her in court. It felt cold, calculated, but I knew it was the right move. Dana had made her choices, and now I had to make mine. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. 2 nights later, Dana came home late. Her hair slightly mussed, her lipstick faded. She greeted me with a smile, but I could barely look at her. The anger inside me boiled over, and before I could stop myself, I said, "How was the Westmore Hotel?" Her smile faltered, and she froze in place. "What?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You heard me," I said, standing up and facing her. "How was the Westmore Hotel? Or should I ask Mark instead?" Her face turned pale, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. "Ben, I don't—" "What are you talking about?" "Don't," I snapped, my voice rising. "Don't insult my intelligence. I know everything, Dana. The lunches, the hotels, the lies. I have proof." She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. I can explain," she stammered. "It's not what you think. Not what I think." I laughed bitterly. "Do you know how many times I've heard that line in the past few weeks? Save it, Dana. I don't want your explanations. I want the truth." For a moment, she seemed to consider denying it. But then her shoulders sagged, and she sat down on the couch, her face buried in her hands. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean for it to happen. He helped me at work, and one thing led to another." Her voice trailed off, and I felt the last shred of my patience snap. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I said, my voice shaking. "Do you even care?" "I care," she said, looking up at me with tears in her eyes. "Ido, I wanted more, Ben. I needed someone who believed in me, who made me feel alive. You've been so lost, so unsure of yourself, and I felt like I was carrying everything." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Part of me wanted to argue, to defend myself, but I couldn't. Deep down, I knew there was some truth in what she was saying, but it didn't excuse what she'd done. It didn't justify the betrayal. "This marriage is over," I said, my voice flat. "I've already contacted a lawyer. You'll be hearing from him soon." Dana's eyes widened in shock. "Ben, wait. Please. We can fix this. I'll end things with Mark. I'll do whatever it takes." But it was too late. She'd made her choice, and now I was making mine. Dana didn't take the divorce announcement well. She tried every tactic in the book: tears, apologies, bargaining. She promised to cut Mark out of her life, begged me to go to counseling, even swore she'd do anything to save our marriage. But the damage was done. I couldn't unsee the betrayal, couldn't unfeel the pain of being lied to by the one person I trusted most in the world. "I can't do this anymore, Dana," I told her during one of her tearful pleas. "You made your choice. Now I have to make mine." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. Matt handled most of the heavy lifting, ensuring that I was protected financially. Thanks to the evidence we'd gathered, Dana didn't have much room to argue. She was blindsided when she realized that I had access to more of her savings than she thought possible. Her high-paying job and my brother's meticulous legal strategy left her with no leverage. "You're really going to take my money, Ben?" she asked bitterly during one of our last conversations. "I worked hard for that, and I worked hard for this marriage," I shot back. "I gave you everything I had, even when I didn't know who I was or what I wanted. You didn't just betray me, Dana. You destroyed everything we built together. I'm taking what I need to rebuild my life." The settlement wasn't just about the money. It was about justice. It gave me the chance to start over, to create something meaningful without her standing in my way. I threw myself into my business idea, channeling every ounce of my anger and grief into building something from the ground up. It wasn't easy, but the fire inside me kept me going. I used the settlement money to launch a small digital marketing firm, starting with local clients and slowly expanding. At first, I doubted myself every step of the way. Would this work? Did I have what it took to succeed? But as the months passed, I began to see results. Clients praised my work, referrals poured in, and I started to feel like I was finally finding my footing. By the end of the first year, my business was thriving. I'd partnered with a few like-minded entrepreneurs who shared my vision, and together, we expanded our network. What started as a small operation quickly grew into something bigger than I'd ever imagined. For the first time in years, I felt alive, truly alive. And then, out of nowhere, Dana reached out. She showed up at my office one afternoon, unannounced. I hadn't seen her in over a year, and the sight of her standing in my doorway sent a jolt of anger and nostalgia through me. "Ben," she said softly, her voice almost timid, "I heard about your success. I wanted to say congratulations." I leaned back in my chair, studying her. She looked the same, but there was a heaviness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "What do you want, Dana?" I asked, keeping my tone even. She hesitated, then sighed. "I miss you. I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I realize now how much I took you for granted. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I wanted to see if there was any part of you that could forgive me." The audacity of her words made me laugh. Not a happy laugh, but a bitter, incredulous one. "Forgive you?" I repeated. "For what? For lying to me? For tearing our marriage apart? For putting me through hell?" Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't feel an ounce of pity. "I thought I was doing what was best for us," she said. "I thought if I could secure our future, it would make everything better. But I was wrong. I see that now." I shook my head, my anger simmering just below the surface. "You didn't do this for us, Dana. You did it for yourself. And you know what? I'm glad you did, because it showed me who you really are." I stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. "I've moved on. My life is better without you in it. Whatever guilt you're carrying, that's your burden, not mine. Goodbye, Dana." She started to say something, but I didn't stick around to hear it. I walked out of the room, leaving her behind for good. After that encounter with Dana, something inside me shifted. It was as if the last vestige of my old life, the pain, the betrayal, the anger, finally fell away. I walked out of the office that day feeling lighter than I had in years. Whatever strings Dana thought she still had on me were severed for good. My business continued to flourish, growing beyond anything I'd initially envisioned. New opportunities kept rolling in, and before long, I had a team of employees who shared my drive and passion. We worked hard, celebrated every win, and supported each other through the inevitable challenges. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. But the most surprising development came in the form of someone new. Her name was Emily. We met through a mutual friend at a networking event, and from the moment we started talking, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, a genuine connection. She was warm, funny, and unpretentious. Unlike Dana, she didn't care about status or appearances. She was real. At first, I was hesitant to open myself up again. My trust had been shattered, and I wasn't sure I was ready to let someone in. But Emily wasn't like anyone I'd ever met. She didn't push or rush me. She just showed up, day after day, with her quiet kindness and unwavering support. One evening, after months of getting to know each other, we went out for dinner at a cozy little restaurant in town. As we sipped our wine and laughed over shared stories, Emily suddenly grew serious. "Ben," she said, her eyes meeting mine, "I need to tell you something." I tensed, wondering if she was about to drop some bombshell that would send me spiraling again. "What is it?" I asked cautiously. "I've been through something similar," she said softly. "A few years ago, my fiancé cheated on me. It broke me, but it also made me stronger. It taught me what I want and don't want in a partner. And what I want is honesty, respect, and someone who values me for who I am. I just thought you should know." Her words hit me harder than I expected. For the first time, I felt like someone truly understood what I'd been through. "Emily," I said, my voice thick with emotion, I've spent so long trying to rebuild myself after what happened with Dana. I wasn't sure I'd ever trust anyone again. But with you, it's different. You've shown me that not everyone is out to hurt me. And for that, I'm grateful. From that moment on, our relationship deepened. Emily became a constant presence in my life, not just as a partner, but as a source of strength and inspiration. She didn't care about my success or my business. She cared about me. And for the first time, I felt truly seen. Being with Emily was like rediscovering a part of myself I thought I'd lost forever. She brought out a side of me that had been buried under years of self-doubt and pain. At first, I was hesitant to let her in completely. The scars Dana left behind were still fresh, and I was terrified of making the same mistakes. But Emily had this way of breaking down walls without even trying. She never pushed me to talk about Dana or the betrayal, but she listened whenever I chose to share. And when I told her about the divorce, the surveillance, and the confrontation, she didn't judge me. She just sat there holding my hand and said, "You deserved better. I'm glad you found a way to move forward." Her support gave me the courage to trust again, little by little. It wasn't easy. There were moments when my insecurities reared their ugly heads. Times when I questioned her motives, doubted her sincerity, and second-guessed my own worth. But Emily never wavered. She met my fears with patience and understanding, reminding me that I wasn't alone in this. One evening, as we sat on my porch watching the sunset, I found myself opening up in a way I hadn't before. I began, my voice hesitant. After Dana, I didn't think I'd ever be able to love anyone again. She broke something in me, something I didn't think could be fixed. Emily looked at me, her eyes soft and unwavering. And now, I took a deep breath, the weight of my words hanging in the air. Now, I'm starting to believe that maybe I can. Because of you. She reached over and took my hand, her touch grounding me in the moment. "Ben," she said softly, "love isn't about never getting hurt. It's about finding someone who's worth the risk. And for what it's worth, I think you're worth it." Her words stayed with me long after that night. They became a beacon of hope, a reminder that not all relationships were destined to end in heartbreak. With Emily, I felt safe. I felt valued. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could be myself, flaws and all. As our relationship grew, so did my business. Emily was there every step of the way, cheering me on and offering insights that only someone with her unique perspective could provide. She didn't just see my success. She saw the work, the passion, and the determination that went into every milestone. It wasn't long before she became more than just my partner. She became my anchor, the person I turned to when the pressures of work and life threatened to overwhelm me. And in return, I became hers. Together, we built a life that felt authentic and true. It wasn't perfect, no life ever is, but it was ours. And for the first time, I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could finally leave the pain of the past behind. Months passed, and my life with Emily felt like a fresh chapter, a story I actually wanted to live. My business was thriving, and Emily and I were building something beautiful together. I was finally starting to feel whole again. But just as I was settling into this new sense of peace, Dana came back into the picture. It started with an email. The subject line read, "Can we talk?" I hesitated before opening it. My initial reaction was to delete it without reading, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a long, rambling message. She wrote about how much she missed me, how she realized she'd made a terrible mistake, and how proud she was of the man I'd become. "Ben, I don't expect you to forgive me, but I just want you to know that I regret everything. Losing you is the worst thing that ever happened to me. If there's any way we can talk, I'd be grateful." I stared at the screen, a mix of anger and disbelief churning in my chest. It was galling, really. She had torn our marriage apart, and now that I'd rebuilt my life, she thought she could just waltz back in as if nothing had happened. I didn't respond. I didn't have the energy for her anymore. But Dana wasn't one to take silence as an answer. A week later, she showed up at my office. My assistant buzzed me, sounding hesitant. "Ben, there's a woman here to see you. She says it's personal." I knew immediately who it was. "Tell her I'm busy. I said curtly, but a few minutes later, there was a knock on my door. Before I could say anything, Dana walked in, her eyes wide and apologetic. "Ben," she began, her voice trembling. "I know you don't want to see me, but please, just hear me out." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "You have 2 minutes." She nodded, visibly nervous. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't realize what I had until it was gone. You were a good husband, Ben, a great one. And I ruined it. I let my ambition, my insecurities, and Mark cloud my judgment." Her voice cracked, and she looked at me, waiting for a reaction. I gave her none. "I've been following your success," she continued. "You've done so well for yourself. And I can see now that I didn't believe in you the way I should have. I let my doubts get in the way, and I made the biggest mistake of my life." I stared at her, my emotions swirling. A part of me wanted to lash out, to remind her of the pain she'd caused. But another part of me, one I was surprised to find, felt nothing at all. "I don't know what you're hoping to accomplish by coming here," I said finally. "You apologized. Fine. But you can't undo what you did, Dana. You destroyed our marriage, and you destroyed my trust. I've moved on. You should too." Tears welled in her eyes. "I know I hurt you, but I still love you, Ben. Can't we at least try to fix this? For everything we shared." I shook my head, standing up and opening the door. "No, Dana. What we shared is gone. And honestly, I'm glad it is. Because I've found someone who values me for who I am. And that's something you never did." She didn't fight me. She just stood there, her shoulders slumping as she realized there was nothing left to salvage. Without another word, she walked out of my office, leaving me with a sense of closure I didn't know I needed. Dana's visit marked the final turning point in my journey. Seeing her so vulnerable, so desperate, might have shaken me in the past. But now, it only reinforced how far I'd come. She no longer had power over me. Her choices were her burden to carry, and I wasn't about to shoulder any of it for her. Emily, of course, noticed that something was weighing on me that evening. She always had a way of sensing when I was lost in thought. "Want to talk about it?" she asked as we sat on the couch, her legs tucked under her. "Dana came by the office today," I said simply. Her brow furrowed, but she didn't react the way I feared she might. There was no jealousy, no insecurity, just quiet concern. "How did that go?" I shrugged. She apologized, said she missed me, but it doesn't matter. I told her I'd moved on. Emily smiled, her eyes warm. "And have you?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes, completely." She leaned over and kissed me, and in that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Gratitude for her, for the life we were building, and for the strength I'd found within myself to let go of the past. The next few months were a whirlwind of growth, both professionally and personally. My business continued to expand, and Emily became an integral part of my journey. She wasn't just my partner in life. She was my sounding board, my confidant, and in many ways, my biggest cheerleader. We traveled together, explored new opportunities, and spent long nights talking about our dreams for the future. She encouraged me to think bigger, to take risks I never would have considered before. And in return, I supported her in every way I could, just as she supported me. One evening, as we sat on the balcony of a small villa we'd rented for a weekend getaway, I realized just how much my life had changed. The man I'd been during my marriage to Dana, unsure of himself, dependent on her approval, was unrecognizable now. I had rebuilt myself from the ground up, and I was proud of the man I'd become. "Penny for your thoughts?" Emily asked, breaking me out of my reverie. I smiled, taking her hand in mine. "I was just thinking about how lucky I am, how lucky we are." She squeezed my hand, her eyes twinkling. "I think we make our own luck, Ben. And you've worked harder than anyone I know to get here. You deserve all of this." Her words hit me in a way I didn't expect. For so long, I'd felt like I was playing catch-up, trying to prove myself to everyone around me. But with Emily, I didn't need to prove anything. She saw me for who I was, and that was enough. As the months turned into a year, my life felt unrecognizably different. The man who once doubted his worth had become someone confident, capable, and surrounded by people who believed in him. Emily was the cornerstone of that transformation, and with every passing day, I found myself more certain about what I wanted. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I came home to find Emily sitting on the porch, a glass of wine in her hand and a book balanced on her lap. The sight of her, so serene, so perfectly at ease, filled me with a warmth I hadn't known I was capable of feeling. "Hey you," she said, smiling up at me as I joined her. "Hey," I replied, sitting beside her. For a moment, we just sat there, enjoying the quiet hum of the evening. But my heart was racing. I've been planning this moment for weeks, and now that it was here, I felt a nervous energy building inside me. "I've been thinking," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "About us. About the future." She tilted her head, studying me. "What about it?" "I want us to build a life together," I said, reaching into my pocket and pulling out a small box. "Not just as partners, but as something more." Her eyes widened as I opened the box to reveal a simple, elegant ring. "Emily, you've shown me what real love looks like. You've helped me rebuild myself in ways I didn't think were possible. I can't imagine my life without you. Will you marry me?" For a moment, she just stared at me, her hand covering her mouth. Then, tears filled her eyes, and she nodded, laughing through the emotion. "Yes, Ben. Of course, yes." The relief and joy that washed over me were indescribable. As I slipped the ring onto her finger, I realized that this moment, this quiet, heartfelt moment, was everything I'd ever wanted. It wasn't flashy or dramatic. It was real, just like us. In the days that followed, we shared the news with friends and family. Everyone was thrilled, though none more so than my brother Matt. "About time," he teased when I told him. "You're finally making smart decisions." For the first time in a long time, I felt like my life was truly my own. I wasn't defined by my past, by Dana, or by the mistakes that had brought me here. I was defined by the choices I was making now, the people I surrounded myself with, the risks I took, and the love I was building with Emily. The day Emily and I exchanged vows was one of the most surreal and beautiful days of my life. We kept it simple, just close friends and family in a small garden ceremony. As I stood there, looking into her eyes, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. This wasn't just a new chapter, it was a new book entirely. When I said, "I do," it wasn't just a promise to Emily. It was a promise to myself. A promise to leave the past behind, to embrace the life I'd worked so hard to build, and to never again settle for less than I deserved. Emily had given me more than love. She'd given me hope, a sense of purpose, and the courage to trust again. After the wedding, life didn't magically become perfect, but it was ours, and that was enough. My business continued to grow, and Emily started her own venture, a small nonprofit aimed at helping women rebuild their lives after hardships. Watching her work with such passion and dedication reminded me of the strength it took to overcome our respective battles. We supported each other in ways I'd never thought possible. When one of us stumbled, the other was there to catch them. It wasn't just love, it was partnership, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared values. A year into our marriage, Emily and I found out we were expecting our first child. The news filled me with a mix of excitement and nerves, but mostly, it filled me with a sense of completeness. This was the life I'd always dreamed of, a family built on love, honesty, and resilience. When our daughter was born, I held her in my arms and thought about how far I'd come. The man who had once been lost, unsure of himself and his future, had found his way. And as I looked at Emily, who was smiling through tears, I knew that every trial, every betrayal, and every moment of doubt had been worth it to lead me here. I never heard from Dana again after she walked out of my office that final time. Sometimes, I catch myself wondering how her life turned out, but those thoughts grew less frequent with time. She was a chapter in my story, a painful one, but one that had taught me invaluable lessons about love, trust, and self-worth. In the end, her betrayal wasn't my undoing. It was the catalyst for my growth. It forced me to look inward, to rebuild myself piece by piece, and to find a love that was real and lasting. And for that, I could finally let go of the anger and resentment. As I sat on the porch one evening, watching Emily play with our daughter in the yard, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and that was more than enough. Because in the end, I'd learned the most important lesson of all. You don't need someone else to believe in you. You just need to believe in yourself. And when you do, the right people will find their way into your life, and they'll stay. So, what do you think about my story? Drop a comment with your thoughts on my decision and how you would have handled it.